All right, Mike, let's get started. This is going to be awesome because I've been looking forward to this. When you were telling me, I've heard this conspiracy before. I've heard it about it's not really Paul McCartney. And I ask, why would that be? I don't understand the agenda behind it, but you're going to explain all that to me. I mean, because this can lead to so many other things like Michael Jackson, Prince, Elvis. I mean, it opens the door for everything.
It does. It does. The Beatles are foundational. When we talk about the pop culture, pop rock music, David, they are the foundation. There were others before them, but as we just talked about before we got started, Tavistock is designed the Beatles to have a long-term strategy, right? They are, I call them the Pied Pipers of the Eon of Horus. And the Eon of Horus goes back to Aleister Crowley. And if we have time, I can get into that to some degree.
Aleister Crowley.
Yes, yes. So
he's been behind most all these movements, correct? The social engineering of this.
Yeah, Crowley is very important because of his eons, and he's held in very high esteem by those inside the pyramid of power. So you can call them whatever you want, the controllers, the Illuminati, and so on. So his religion of Thelema, which is Greek for will, is the predominant spiritual and religious philosophy of those within the pyramid. And that's why we hear, do as thou wilt. Nike's tagline, just do it. It's the same thing. If we go back in time, there was an old tagline going back into I guess it was the 60s and 70s. If it feels good, do it. These are all derivatives of do as thou wilt. And Crowley explained that there were three eons that he discussed: the eon of Isis, the eon of Osiris. The eon of Osiris overlaps with the age of Pisces. So Crowley argues that the age of Pisces had to do with humanity being shackled and not being able to pursue their true and pure will. So it was a time when humans were not free. He claimed that the Eon of Horus, which is the next eon, which he would equate with the age of Aquarius, which I shouldn't say he, but it overlaps with the age of Aquarius, is a time when all of that shackling goes away. People become unshackled. They're able to pursue their true will. Nobody is going to get in your way or my way or anybody's way of pursuing what our desires are. Our will dictates where we'd like to go. So the Eon of Horus is the eon that Crowley said began in the early 1900s, and which I have put a stake in the ground and said that it really went pedal to the metal starting in 1960. I use 1960 as that starting point where it really
went full speed.
Okay. And that's when we have when you think about it, that's the whole counterculture movement.
Jim Morrison, the Doors.
Right. The whole Laurel Canyon scene, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones.
But the Beatles were the big ones, right? That was the first manufactured band.
Yes.
Really? So what was the Doors manufactured? They were all manufactured.
They were all manufactured. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because when I say they're all manufactured, people ask, well, are you saying that they didn't play their own instruments or they didn't write some of their music? And that's not what I'm saying. And with the Beatles, especially between 1962 and 66, based upon my research,
let me ask you. Let me just cut in real quick for a second. Yeah. Let me because I'm kind of misunderstanding something here. Did the Beatles form their own band and then start making it and then got intercepted, or like the Doors, or like were they manufactured from the very beginning to be a group to be used for the CIA from the very get-go, or were they actually a bunch of guys that like wanted to start a band and they started making music and then they got taken and used for the occult or the CIA for nefarious reasons?
Right. So if I look at the Beatles, I would argue that the Beatles, especially John Lennon and Paul McCartney, I believe it's very possible that they were in a mind control program early on in life. Maybe they're, 12, 13, 14 years old, and they were being handled and groomed at that point in time. Both Lennon and Paul McCartney, their mothers died very early in their lives. In John Lennon's case, his father just disappeared. And I believe that in Paul McCartney's place, biological Paul McCartney's place, his father had a lot to do with the handling and the grooming that was taking place that would subsequently position them to be in that pool of resource that Tavistock is constantly scoping out. Now, a lot of folks don't want to hear that because they just want to believe the official Beatles narrative. I call it the Cinderella story, where it was all organic and these four guys came out of Liverpool, connected with Brian Epstein, a record store owner who subsequently got them signed to EMI under the tutelage of a George Martin, and then went on to unprecedented fame and fortune. Okay. The problem with that story is that that's not how the world works. That's not how the music and entertainment industry works. You don't reach that level of success and notoriety and fame unless you have a machine behind you.
100%.
Right? That's just the way it works. Nothing to that magnitude flies under the controller's radar. Nothing. And for folks that want to believe that that statement's not true, I'm telling you, you have to do more research because that's just simply how it works. So the Beatles, they were doing their little gigs. They weren't a very good band going back, let's just say 1959 going into 1960. In 1960, they had a manager. His name was Alan Williams. Alan Williams, I have deducted, was really their first handler. Before that, Pete Best, who was their drummer, he was organizing their gigs. And then Alan Williams came into the picture. Alan Williams brought the Beatles to Hamburg, Germany in August of 1960. When they got there, it's well documented, they were marginal musicians at best. They weren't very good as far as the skill level on their instruments, and they weren't songwriters. From August 1960 to December of 1960, they just banged around in Germany. They were playing, 7 hours a night, drinking, doing what young guys do when, right, they were in that environment. They cut loose. And then they went home in December of 1960. It was just a flop. Nothing panned out for them. And in this book here, The Lennon Prophecy by Joseph Niezgoda, he explains that both John Lennon and Paul McCartney went back home in December of 1960 feeling defeated, not feeling really good about what happened in Germany, because basically nothing happened in Germany. And then if you fast forward, so from August of 1960 to when the Beatles arrive in America on February 7th of 1964, that's only 3.5 years, David.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the timeline and then what was going on under the hood during that time period. So we have this band who are not very good musicians. They're not songwriters in August of 1960. And then there's this trajectory that takes them to February 7th, 1964, where they landed in America with a tour that was referred to as the Beatles Conquering America. So this was really the beginning of the British invasion. So that whole 3.5 year period of time, that stretch of time, there was a lot going on there.
Mm.
And what was going on is the Beatles were being shaped, groomed, and handled to play the role that they ended up playing on behalf of the controllers.
And they really upset and dethroned Elvis.
Yeah, so they surpassed Elvis. So Elvis, think of Elvis, Bill Haley and the Comets, those types of bands, groups, and artists. as table setting. So what Tavistock does, so Tavistock rolls it under the Committee of 300. And for those who are interested in learning about the Committee of 300 and Tavistock, this book here, I think I might have showed it on the last interview, by Dr. Coleman, The Committee of 300, A Conspirator's Hierarchy. A very, very important book that I think the first edition was released back in the early 1990s. So 30 years ago, very prophetic, but you get to understand a lot. And in that book, Coleman introduces the fact that Tavistock created the Beatles as a massive social engineering initiative. The other book that you should read, folks, take a look at, that I highly recommend, is Daniel Estulin's book on the Tavistock Institute, Social Engineering the Masses. The Committee of 300 and Tavistock are behind the Beatles' psychological operation. It was a social engineering initiative.
And every band since, right? Every band since, I mean, that are mainstream, correct? That really made it big on the scene. They're all been controlled.
Yeah, they are all in the controlling matrix, David. So the way we should look at this is there are degrees of control. Now, some bands are put out there like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, because the Rolling Stones are in the same category as the Beatles, were put out there as social engineering initiatives coming out of Tavistock in order to begin the whole social engineering agenda. Now, that social engineering agenda was all about breaking down traditional values, breaking down existing institutionalized religions. And the primary focus was on breaking down Christianity. This is why we have
chipping away at it. And the way they did that was through the music, through entertainment. Now, I'm not just talking about women's liberation, breaking the family unit. They all did it simultaneously. It all came in at once.
Right. So you cannot look at anything as just a single thread. They have multiple threads. It's very dynamic, running at the same time. So in other words, if the music is not your thing, and we can't get you to shift around your thoughts and your ethics and whatever through music, then we'll get you here and we'll get you there. Maybe it's through the movies.
Wow.
Maybe you have it through the women's movement. You know,
they did it all at the same. The timing was everything. They bring in the music, they bring in the movements, they bring in the movies, all just coming in at the same time like a tidal wave.
Yes. So think of it. They always start at a very basic level because they have deemed this is a level we need to start at because this is what will be accepted by most of the population. So they introduce things small at first.
Look where we're at right now, though. Look how far we've come to this whole LGBT thing movement, demonic presences on TV. The music is just, I'm sorry, but it's just gone completely demonic. It's just the frequency of it is just like this low vibrational tone, and the music itself is demonic. Everything's demonic now. Commercials. It's almost like fentanyl coming through the border, killing everybody. It's all finally hit this culmination, this climax point now where we're self-destructing. That's what they've kind of led us to this point in time where we're at right now, right?
Right. That's it. So think of it as like going upstairs. The first step is Bill Haley and the Comets. Second step might be Elvis. Then the third step, you get to the Beatles. And then you get to the British invasion. And then as you move along, now it's punk. Then it's glam. Then it's heavy metal. Then it's hard rock. It's techno. It's rap. It's hip hop. All of that stuff. So we've gotten to the point now, you and I talked before we got started here about sound. Now, sound is very important. I was listening to an interview by Alan Watt. Alan's not around anymore. He was did a lot of social commentary, and he was also in the music business for a long time. And in one of his interviews, he had mentioned that George Martin, who was the Beatles producer, was an expert in sound engineering. And we're not talking about the sound engineer to pull together the music. I mean, that's part of it as well, but more in terms of how sound affects people, how you reach them psychologically through sound. And I found that to be very interesting. But if you listen to, example, rap, with its very, very heavy bass beat, and then you have the cadence of the lyrics, it's a form of hypnosis. So with that constant beat, boom, 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 and then you start rapping lyrics, you've got a hypnosis process going.
Right. Right.
And the frequency and the sound is disruptive. And so it's going to make people agitated. It might make them feel out of sorts. They have this whole process of how to affect the human psychology, David. They have it down to an art. They've been at it for a very, very long time. In fact, they're so advanced with it that most people can't even fathom where it's at right now. But you wanted to know a little bit more about Tavistock. So Tavistock is the World Center for Mass Mind Manipulation and Social Engineering Activities.
Wow.
It's a sophisticated organization used to shape the destiny of the world by changing the paradigm of modern society. These are charts I put together that I presented over time. It has its control mechanisms in academia, multimedia, intelligence, medicine, especially the pharmaceutical industry. It has a range of disciplines which include anthropology, economics, organizational behavior, look at that as the international corporate structure, political science, psychoanalysis, psychology, and sociology. So its roots are everywhere. And again, folks, if you're interested, Daniel's book lays it out. It was written, I think, back in 2008, but you'll learn a lot from this book, a lot. And so everything that goes on in the entertainment industry, which includes music, it's all planned out. There's a strategy behind all of it. I think last time we spoke, I mentioned if you go to Netflix or Amazon Prime and you start watching a movie, all of the agenda items that we are confronted with today, you mentioned a few of them before. I'm going to try to keep this as clean as possible.
Climate. I see a lot of it's climate.
Yeah, climate and other agendas, right?
Right.
They are embedded into the themes and the scripts of these.
You think you're going to watch a documentary on Netflix? It's all propaganda, man.
Yeah. They're pushing all kinds of stuff. So you have to ask yourself, how is that? How is it? I still come across people that think that there is no world order, that there is no internationalist structure. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
If we just go back to the event of March of 2020, that is pretty much, it's still playing out to some degree now.
Yeah.
If you go back to that, you have to ask yourself, folks, how is it that everybody received the exact same script? How is it that everybody, when I talk about everybody, I'm talking about each country, declared the same states of emergency, the same process applied to everybody worldwide? How can that be? If you don't think that there's an international structure in place. And just take a look at all the international structure. We have the International Monetary Fund, we have the World Bank, we have the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the United Nations. They're there for a reason, and they've been there a long time. And the reason why they're there is to implement their strategy to usurp national sovereignty and bring about a one world order, or a new world order, with a one world religion, by the way. So that's what we're confronted with right now.
When I was talking to Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, and at the fights, he gave me his book. He signed and gave me his book. He's talking about how they inundated the black neighborhoods with crack cocaine.
Yes.
At the same time as the hip hop music was coming through. The hip hop music controllers were also the owners of the private prison systems that the drugs were leading to. So all of it led as like a stream into the prison systems that they controlled. It's pretty fascinating, that how this all took place. And then I have other theories on this as well, but this is all an agenda. This is all to destroy and corrupt society so they can break us down and then rebuild us in their image, correct?
Right. It's order from chaos. We've all heard that, right? So I want to you mentioned hip hop. So this article comes from AARP, which is loaded up with propaganda for seniors, loaded up.
Yeah.
So this article, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to show folks, I want to read it to you so that you can understand how this is completely set up. So it's 50 years of hip hop. So that's what they're celebrating. What emerged from a simple party in 1973 has evolved into a global cultural movement. Everything is global. Now, I'm going to read this, and then hopefully most folks will be able to pick out the problem with what I'm going to read here. It all started on August 11th, 1973. An 18-year-old Clive Campbell and his younger sister Cindy hosted a dance party billed as a back-to-school jam in the rec room of an apartment complex at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx, New York. The details are now the stuff of legend. Okay, that's all I'm going to read. Now, you have to ask yourself, how does anybody know that hip-hop began on August 11th, 1973, at a party that a person by the name of Clive Campbell and his sister Cindy threw?
Yeah, it's impossible to know.
It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous narrative. So what is it? It's made up. Now, I'm not saying that Clive Campbell and his sister Cindy didn't exist, but it was pulled together to fabricate this official narrative, to put together this story. So to be able to pinpoint something like that, you have to understand that is a narrative that's put out by the controllers, because there's just simply no way. And again, so they're saying back in 1973, this little party, this little shindig was thrown, and then 50 years later, it's a worldwide, global cultural movement. That's how it works. So people will read articles like this, and they will read it, and they will believe it. They will take it verbatim. They will embrace it. And you know what that is, folks? This is conditioning. This is propaganda. This is fiction that is sold to you. And this goes on all the time. I'm just using this particular article as an example.
And you know, for my audience too, to understand this, even what's so important about music is its vibration, correct, Mike? It's vibration. And that Japanese scientist, I forget his name, that showed that water responds to intent and vibration, that it changes the molecular structure, either good or positive or negatively, is the same with music and intent. So what we're listening to, we are water. We were made, what, 75, 90% water? I'm not sure the exact number, but we change with vibrational intent. So whatever they're pushing through the airwaves is changing our molecular structure, correct?
Yes, it absolutely is. And that's the other thing. They want people to believe you're just a sack of, skin and bones. But we are electrical beings, and we respond, positive or negative, to frequency and vibration. Like David just said, I forgot that doctor's name too, for the life of me. But
Miko something. I could be wrong, but
he did these tests with the water, and he showed how when you put a label on the water that said love, how the water reacted to that, and in a very positive and beautiful way. And then if you took a label and you put hate on it, how it got all distorted and it looked very dysfunctional. But music is the same way. Now, you're going to hear debates in the alternative media and just across the internet about the frequency of music. So going back, I think it was the 1950s, when I say they, I forgot which association it was, but they determined that tuning the note A to 440 hertz was going to be the industry standard now. So A equals 440. So in fact, for those of you who are musicians and for those of you who are not, this is a tuner, guitar tuner that goes on your headstock. So this tuner tunes to 440 hertz across all 6 of your guitar strings or all 4 of your bass strings. So that's the standard today. However, there are those who've done research that will say that 440 is a disruptive frequency. It's not a frequency that is in harmony with the human frequency. And that number is 432 hertz, which means 432 is just slightly more flat, tuning down. So to go from 440 to 432, you just tune down a bit. What they did was, if 432 is the frequency that resonates with humans organically and naturally, what they did was they sharpened it. They tuned it up to 440 to make it ever so slightly different, but still disruptive. So when you think about these types of maneuvers,
when did they start doing that again?
I believe it was the 1950s.
Wow.
I have to go back and take a look. It was a while ago that I took a look at it. There was an association, I forgot the name of it. And they got together and they said, well, yeah, we're going to establish that 440 hertz is the standard for tuning. So I mean, I'll play at 440 because everything is tuned to 440. But sometimes what I'll do is I have software that will convert 440 back to 432.
Got you.
You see? And what I've noticed when you go from 440 to 432 is the music has a warmer feel to it. And that's just me. Now, some people will say they can't tell the difference, but there are many people that say that if they listen to the comparison between a 440 hertz song and a 432, that they can clearly tell which is which.
That leads me to believe, is it Noah Harari? Is it
Yuval Harari.
Yuval Harari. He says human beings are completely hackable.
Yes.
And that we should have no free will. That we're completely hackable beings. And if you really think about it, just with music alone, obviously they're hacking us. That's how they're hacking human beings, is by music and what we see on television and the agendas they push through the movements, the music and the propaganda they show on television. They're able to create these groups like BLM, LGBTQ, and push these agendas through as we are in that a hypnotic trance?
Yeah.
What are we under that we accept all these agendas?
What happens is, well, I'm a retired certified master hypnotherapist, and I was in private practice for 12 years.
So I'm on the money.
So I know a little bit about this, and I've actually have done presentations on this topic. So we'll use the TV as an example because that's their biggest tool. It's a hypnosis box. So when you watch television, what happens is there are 4 basic trance states. You have beta, which is your waking state. Below that is alpha. That's the first level of trance. Below that is theta. And then below that is delta. Delta is sleep. So if you were wondering why one of the variants was called delta, right? What they were doing is they were poking at people. In other words, you have to be asleep to believe this.
Wow.
So when a variant was called delta, that's what they were saying. Now, so what happens is when you're watching television, you drop into an alpha state. You drop into a light trance state. And what's taking place on the television, let's just say you're watching cable news. If you've ever noticed, what they do is they will play a video loop over and over and over again of some event or some tragedy or however they classify it. Now, the reason why they're playing loops over and over again is because the subconscious / unconscious mind loves imagery, loves it. So as you go into that light trance state and you're focused on that television and they're playing that loop, you're taking it in and they're playing it over and over and over again. And then what they'll do is they'll flash up hypnotic suggestions in the form of, there's 2 ways they do it. One, they will put printed words up on the television. It will say tragedy, shooting, war. These are words which they're concerning, right? You're okay, what's going on here? And then they're showing you the loop at the same time. So this has all happened simultaneously. And then you have the reporter or the quote anchor. Now in hypnosis, when we want to embed positive suggestion, in other words, you want to get somebody to stop smoking, to release weight, to be better at public speaking, you anchor suggestions. And that's why they're called anchors, because they're anchoring what's taking place on the television set. So now you've got the visuals, you're in the trance state.
I mean, it's all there in plain sight. Everything
It's
you're
all
saying.
there. It's all there. And the other thing that they do is they like to use the colors blue and red. Now, blue and red are the way the mind interprets blue is calm, relaxed, generosity, voice of reason. Red, on the other hand, the mind automatically, it's just embedded in us to look at the color red and think about fear, concern, beware, be on guard, be watchful, be prudent. So this is why when they put their news out there, a lot of times you're going to see these blue and red sets. And depending upon how they want to affect your mind, they will focus more on the red than the blue. A lot of times you'll have two talking heads will show up on some cable news show. And you might have one guy who has a red tie on and the other guy has a blue tie. Now, the guy with the blue tie, sometimes they'll even have a bluish background. This is the person that is supposed to be the voice of reason. This is the person that's giving you, I know, just relax. We've got this under control. Nothing to worry about here. We've got it. Move over to the other person who's got the red tie and maybe some more red in the background.
Urgency.
This is the person that's telling you, hey, you need to be aware, be alert, be careful. There's danger out there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Okay. Now, also the blue and red, to make matters even a little more complicated, to give people something to think about, is they represent the two lodges of Freemasonry. You have the Blue Lodge and the Red Lodge.
Wow. I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, blue and red. Now, if you look at a Fox News set, the typical Fox News set is a lot of blue and red, a lot. Mm-hmm. And they all do it, but Fox is like over the top with it from what I've seen. And Fox will even put a little orange in there for you. And it's like, why is orange in there? Because the color orange, when you spell it out in Pythagorean numerology, because they love their numbers, because as I mentioned in the last show, it's all occulted. Occultists run the show, folks. It's not your presidents, it's not your prime ministers. Occultists run the show. And when you put when you spell out orange in Pythagorean numerology, put it into a numerology calculator, it totals to 33. So it's 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Okay, so they're always leaving their calling cards. So it's not just a calling card, the blue and red, but there is also a significant psychological impact that the mind automatically takes in. And this is how they do it. If we go back to the event that took place in September of 2001 in New York, going back to the looped video, I know people, I wondered it myself back in the day, well, why is it we keep seeing that same video over and over and over and over again? That's the reason why. Because
is it because when they tell a lie long enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth to them, and that's how it works in the mind?
Yeah, so that's a big piece of it. It's conditioning. So when it kept showing that loop from September of 2001, that was embedding what went on there with the words they were putting up on the screen, with the narrative that the anchor or the quote news person was speaking about. Think of the person who's speaking during a newscast, whether it be on the ABC, NBC, CBS, or the cable networks, as the hypnotist. He's giving you a narrative. He's giving you suggestions. They then become post-hypnotic suggestions. Post-hypnotic means once you leave the hypnosis session, that's where your mind is going to be. That's what your mind is going to focus on. And it's very, very, complex. That particular event was a trauma-based event, trauma-based mind control event, as is so many other events that took place. March 2020, the same thing. It's the same thing. The same process.
And that's why they call it a television program.
Yeah, because it's programming you. It's programming you. It's programming you to be docile. It's programming you to believe things that aren't true.
Because if you think about it, most people, when they're sitting in front of a television, including myself, sometimes I fall asleep. It puts me to sleep. So I know that's hypnosis.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. The television had one single objective from day one. They knew at some point it was going to be able to be their biggest tool in their toolbox to condition people. They knew it from day one. And like I said, they start simple. And then they just, like the staircase I mentioned before, they just keep building upon it. And it gets more and more sophisticated, more complicated as far as people's ability to sift through information. That's the other thing they do. It's information overload. And this is what they do all the time. In hypnosis, so if you have a client that is not able to go into hypnosis easily, let's say a lot of times this will happen when somebody is in a career where, like an accountant or somebody who does coding, they're very, very analytical.
Yeah.
So what we do is a technique called the confusion technique. So the confusion technique, what that does is that dishes out to the subconscious mind issues or situations or circumstances that are very difficult to reconcile. In fact, sometimes it's not even, there is no reconciliation. There is no answer. But the conscious mind will try to figure out what the answer is. And even though there is no answer, it can be this, this, or that, but the conscious mind is trying to make sense out of it. What happens is the conscious mind gets to a point where it cannot make sense out of it. And what does it do? It backs out. It backs out of that process of trying to figure it out, and it slips below and allows the subconscious mind to emerge. And that's another technique that they have, the confusion technique.
Doesn't the subconscious basically doesn't know how to disseminate? It takes everything as truth, right? Am I correct in saying that?
The subconscious?
Right. Whatever suggestions you give it, it will take as truth, correct?
Not always. The subconscious mind can reject suggestion. So some hypnotists will say that the subconscious or the unconscious mind goes both ways. I call it the inner mind. It will take things literally, but the thing is, the subconscious / unconscious mind or the inner mind can reject suggestion. I know this because, like I said, I was in practice for 12 years, and I was very good at what I did. So the way the mind works, David, think of it as a hard drive on a computer. This is the analogy, and this is how it works. So as you go through life, what happens is there are certain events that take place. And when those events take place, especially when you're younger, those events write files to your hard drive. So if you were scared or traumatized as a kid, those files get written. All right. And the more you use those files, the more prominent they become, the larger they become, and it starts to dictate your behavior. I used to have clients come in and say to me, adults, 40s, 50s, 60s, and say, Mike, I have no idea why I react a certain way to a particular situation. I have no idea. As an example, public speaking. I know my material. I'm really good at it. I'm an expert in my field. But when I get in front of people, I just lock up, and I lose my confidence and all that. Well, if you put that person into hypnosis and you regress them back in time, they'll go back to when they were a kid. And when they were a child, I'll use this as an example. Perhaps they were in school and they went up to present and something didn't go well. Maybe they got ridiculed. Something happened which damaged their confidence. That file got
carried with them the rest of their life.
Yes. So that file got written to that person's hard drive, the hard drive of the mind. Now, as they go forward in life, if they continue to reinforce that fear, that concern, that file just gets bigger and bigger. And now, whenever you're in a situation that's similar to what happened in school back when you were, in maybe 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, That's going to be your behavior. That's going to be your reaction. It's going to be, I don't know if I can do this. I don't have the confidence. My self-esteem is low. I don't get this. Now, the thing is, hypnosis, when you use it for good, which is what myself and many of my colleagues, I was board certified by the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. You can reframe and you can change up and update that file. Because once the mind goes back in time and realizes, oh, okay, so that's where that came from. Oh. And then you go through what I used to refer to as exercises to bring about the positive change. In other words, to tell the mind, hey, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to be here. We want to be confident. We want to be a really good public speaker, all of that stuff.
Remove and delete, right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Delete the old files, bring in the new. And then what happens is, then when you go back on stage and you go into publicly speak and you do a good job and you realize that you might have been a little nervous, but not like it used to be, now your confidence builds.
Let me ask you,
better and better at it.
Do you see people now with like social media and like alternative media? Is that something that they can't really control fully? The powers that be cannot really control let's say the globalists, that they cannot really control social media the way they want to, like they did with television, because there's a lot of alternative media platforms like my channel. We're having this discussion. This is stuff they don't want leaked out there. They don't want this out there. So the fact that they cannot control these conversations, that's got to be waking a lot of people up.
Yes. So it's a very interesting dichotomy. They've got themselves in a little bit of a bind. They created social media, and they created social media as a big, we spoke about this, I think, in the last show. It's a gigantic data collection vehicle for them to take into their big Borg, their artificial intelligence. And they do have AI. I've even seen people say, oh, AI doesn't exist. No, AI does exist. It's alive and well. Okay. And is it perfected? No. But it's progressing leaps and bounds with each passing day, week, month, and year. So they're scraping all kinds of data. Now, and the reason why social media was put out there was because it was to create this narcissistic, for the most part,
I talk
society.
about this on my show all the time.
Yes, everything's about me. Everybody wants to be a celebrity. Everybody,
and let me guess, they did this at first with reality TV shows.
Yep. Reality TV shows were the start, and then out into social media.
You're saying this was designed, this was engineered, this wasn't just the natural flow of things.
No,
it was actually, they planned this. They said first comes the reality TV, then comes Instagram, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, where everyone's famous now. How many likes do I get? How many followers do I have? Right. I mean, I can't believe what I'm seeing when I'm on Instagram, because I come from pre-internet now into this post-internet or this internet era now, where everything I see now is people trying so hard. They can't pull themselves out of the phone to look at the world around them, not even for a second.
Right, because there is no world around them. They are their world. Everything comes back to them. It's this very inward-looking, selfish, narcissistic mentality, even though they may not even be aware of it. Now, the CIA, had the front money to put Facebook up on the map.
Yeah, it was DARPA funded, correct?
And yes, it goes back. Well, I know it goes back to the CIA. Now, could DARPA be involved in it? Most likely. All of these organizations are all intertwined. They're all interlaced. So I was asked a question one time on another show, and they said, well, we have the CIA, and you have MI6, and you have the Mossad. And everybody would kind of thinking these were separate entities. I said, well, they're separate entities from the perspective of, we'll say the CIA is the United States, MI6 is the UK, and the Mossad is Israel. But when you move above that definition, they're all tied out. They're all working together. They're all working together. Now, one of the other social media platforms that I was just chuckling was the TikTok, right? And he was saying, oh, well, TikTok, this came from China, and China this and China that and so on. And it's ridiculous. It's a silly discussion because this government knew very well where TikTok came from, right? They knew where it originated from, and it was allowed to come in and it was allowed to flourish. And then, periodically it'll be used as a punching bag whenever they need a boogeyman or they need some kind of distraction. But that's why we talk about the world order, this internationalist governance that is in place. All of this stuff, folks, you're fed stories all day long. And these stories are designed to keep you disengaged. It's to keep you from, running around.
To know the true reality of the world, because that's how they hold their power. They hold the knowledge.
Yeah.
They want things. They keep us under this hypnosis, correct?
Yes. They want you to chase your tail. And there are agendas out there, and there are psychological operations out there that are designed to keep people sitting in their seats. Don't be vocal. No reason to be kinetic.
Would you say that? Would you say that not only the music industry, not only movies, not only MSM, but NASA?
Oh, yeah.
Would you say Sigmund Freud worked for them? Would you say Darwin? Would you say all of it's under the same thing? I mean, it's just a big psyop.
It's all a lie, David. It's all a lie. Let me talk about NASA. NASA's role, first and foremost, is black ops. It's not about a space program, right? That's the fodder that they give to the gullible masses about rocket launches, and they supposedly sent another probe or whatever around the moon again. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, folks, but I haven't heard a thing about that since they made it a big story going back about 2 months ago. Jack Parsons with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory was a disciple of Aleister Crowley. L. Ron Hubbard.
Scientology, correct?
Scientology. And let me tell you, Scientology is unbelievable. It's really amazing. There's a great show on, I think it's either Netflix or Amazon.
Well, can we even trust it?
Well, what happened was I forgot the gal's name. She's
the actress, right? The actress.
Yes, yeah. The actress, and she spilled the beans, and it's very well done. Can you trust it? I would say, yeah, that one I think you can trust. I mean, not everything that's out there is going to be a total lie. I mean, things do leak through, things do slip through the cracks, and I believe that is one of those shows or one of those presentations that is being truthful.
When you say something like that, like if you watch that movie and it goes back to the symbology and the numerology. So if you see that movie Nefarious and the Sound of Freedom, that so Nefarious, I thought was an amazing movie. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, the last time I looked, it's 33% green splat. I'm like, oh, there it is. In your face, 33%
right
green splat. Now they've been trying to cover up the movie coming out, The Sound of Freedom, with Jim and Tim. I mean, they're doing their best to just flatten that, put a lid on that, but it's not working. So they're trying so hard, but things get through the cracks. Like you said, things leak out, and then they have to do damage control.
This is why I say to folks, David, everybody needs to activate. So you just can't rely on me and David and others to do podcasts, to have websites, to do blogs. If more and more people do it, and more people are pushing the truth out there, or at least getting people to critically think and move beyond the official narratives, all of that stuff, then they have even less control. Right? Because what they want to do with you and they want to do with me is they will deplatform us. But you have to be resourceful too, and you have to be resilient, which means you go find another vehicle to be able to get your message out. And they might be able to ding you initially, and if you have a large YouTube subscriber base, as an example, and then they shoot your channel, then you're going to start someplace else, and you're going to have to build it up again. But for those of us who are doing this work and you have a large YouTube channel, I highly, highly recommend that in parallel, you also create and build your alternative platforms like on BitChute, Odyssey.
Nino's cornered out.
Yes,
That's what I did.
yes, you have to do that because at some point, because they want you to believe they're winning this thing hands down.
Yeah.
And we're
But
putting
we
up
can beat them at their own game. Like what
we're
I'm
putting up a good fight, David. I
yeah,
really
I mean,
do.
by me being the Pied Piper of the normies, you know, I'm going to put this on YouTube, by the way. So this will go on YouTube and Nino's Corner.tv. Edited version will be on YouTube, but I don't think there's any edits in this, to be honest with you. I think
No, so we're keeping it YouTube friendly.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, you have to have backup platforms, no doubt
Yeah,
about it, to fight this war accordingly.
you have to. And I think I mentioned this on the last show. I know a lot of folks, they're really comfortable with YouTube. They like it. They know how to use it and all that stuff. And, but you really have to support the other video platforms. You have
You
to
do.
go there, subscribe to it. Because tomorrow, David's channel can get shot. Mine can get shot. And, that's the reality of the world.
That's just
that we're
what it
living
is.
in.
It is. That's just what it is.
And the more reach you have, the more subscribers you have, you become a bullseye. You're on their radar.
Absolutely.
No
And
question about
I
it.
keep that. I'm mindful of this all the time. And I get nervous every time I do an interview. I send it to an editing team, but it's really sad that we have to live in this type of world right now. I mean, this is not America. This is people need to understand it never was, right? I mean, it's always been controlled. It's always been, would you say Masonic control, occult? Who's the main, what's the core of all this?
Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, so
satanic, demonic.
We satanic. Yes, we have. It is a satanic system. Okay, and but it all goes back. We look at the Freemasons, the Masons, and it being a Masonic system. The United States was actually founded by Freemasons.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond the Freemasons. So it rolls up into the Jesuits, the Vatican. It goes up through the Black nobility, which was, evolved back during the days of Rome. It goes back to Babylon. So the way I look at this is people like to say, okay, who is the controlling party in this whole thing? And what I've concluded is, in all likelihood, it probably all goes back up through the crown, ultimately goes up through the crown. Above the crown, I'm convinced that there are unseen forces that are involved. And some people might think that's crazy, but I'm convinced that that's the case, because a lot of what's going on, folks, it's not pro-humanity.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
The evil that's going on comes from someplace else. It doesn't come from a human being.
No,
it doesn't come
I agree
from
with you 1,000%.
Yeah. So you have
principalities and entities. What is it? The Bible discusses this. This is, we're not fighting anything of the flesh, right? This is something that's out of our scope of our five senses. I believe, whether it's highly intelligent, look, let's just say it, extraterrestrials, whether it's demonic souls, presence. I don't know. It's a force though that hates humanity. It absolutely hates humanity, right?
Yeah, that's the conclusion I've come to, because take a look around and take a look at what's going on. The perpetual wars, as an example. I mean, the perpetual wars are nothing more than it's a blood sacrifice. That's really what it is. It's to send your children, your sons and daughters out to war to spill blood. That's
in masses.
That's that's blood sacrifice stuff. And a lot of people don't want to hear that either, because they're bought into the whole freedom. Military freedom. We got to preserve democracy. None of this stuff is about preserving your freedom, your liberty, or democracy. And it's not even supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic, not a democracy. It drives me crazy when people keep using the word democracy. But you're not free. Okay. Anybody who thinks they're free, you're not free. In fact, 4th of July, what I do on my blog, I've been doing this for years now. I put Happy Dependence Day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're not independent. This country lost its dependence. I mean, its independence going back. If you have to put a stake in the ground with the Act of 1871, when they formulated the District of Columbia, a sovereign city state.
Right. Yeah.
That came right after the Civil War. The Civil War was not about slavery. I'm not saying slavery didn't exist, but slavery was the story you were sold.
That's how they got the blacks to fight as well, correct?
That's how they got everybody to fight.
Right.
And it was all about the oligarchs. It was at the time the international bankers wanting to disrupt this thing called the United States of America and the principles that America had put in place, the founding fathers had put in place. And our principles, when this country was put together, weren't in sync with what the internationalists wanted. So the Civil War was designed, intentionally designed to create hostilities and to break the nation into two. And then once the war was over, money was exhausted. And that's when the bankers came in and said, you know what, we'll fund you. We'll loan you money to rebuild your war-torn country. Well, after that, it was the Act of 1871. And then 40 years after the Act of 1871, we had the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
1913, yeah.
And that's when it was all over with the Federal Reserve Act. Because, folks, the Federal Reserve is a private bank run by the internationalist oligarchs. Okay? And they're charging interest on the money. And it's gotten to the point now, it got to this point a long time ago, where all of your taxes are not even covering the interest, the alleged interest on the loans. And in the Constitution, it says that the Congress is responsible for coining money, not an outside bank. The Federal Reserve, as the old saying is as federal as Federal Express.
Yeah.
All right. And if the United States coined its own money, if the Treasury created its own money, there should be no taxes. Why is that? It's because the government owns the money. So you're not going to
they're IOUs.
You're not going to charge interest to yourself. It's like the example I use, David. Let's just say, you're able to print your own money and you have somebody comes in that's going to put a deck in on your house. But you're able to print your own money. And that guy is willing to accept your printed money. Well, you just make that transaction. There's no interest. There's nothing like that. Because I make the money, I make the money. I don't need to charge interest. So there's no need for taxes. The whole reason why you have taxes is because this was a scheme that was put in place that started with the Federal Reserve Act. And now you go to work between state, local, federal, you're doling out 40 cents on a dollar outside of you. So you're taking in 60 cents on a dollar because everybody's got their hands in your pocket. And then they had this little gimmick where it's like, well, we're not going to raise taxes, but then we're being surcharged for everything.
Yeah.
Right? There's a fee for this, a fee for that. Tolls.
Yeah, whenever someone tells me I own my house free and clear, I'm like, no, you don't.
No, you do not.
Don't pay your property taxes. See what happens. See how fast they take your house.
Exactly. That's right. So that's I use that example as well. Property taxes is a perpetual lien on the property that you don't own. You're renting.
You don't ever own anything. You own nothing.
Even your car.
Yeah.
You're paying property taxes on your car in a lot of states. Here in North Carolina, property tax on a car that I bought, I own. So the whole system, I know
it needs to go. It needs to go. It needs to go, gone, out forever.
The whole system is corrupt. It's corrupt to its core.
Yeah.
Corrupt. And you have to understand something. these congressmen, these senators, these House representatives, the Supreme Court, the presidency, your government resides on sovereign land that is not part of the Republic of the United States, which means we are under foreign occupation. And we have been.
It all goes to the crown, correct?
It goes back to the crown.
Yeah.
It does go back to the crown. And, it's like lawyers, they take an allegiance to the bar. The bar goes back to the crown.
Yeah.
When you go into court, there's no constitution. The courtroom is ruled by admiralty and maritime law, but you just don't know that. In fact, most lawyers don't even know that.
No, they don't.
There are judges that, in all likelihood, don't even know. They just operate within the system that they were brought into. So the whole system is upside down, and what people have to do is you have to question everything. If what most people do, what I found, David, is they cherry pick what it is they want to let go of and what they want to hold on to. I see this all the time. I mean, not to go back to the music. Well, I go back to
the Bible.
I go back to like the music as an example, right? So I talk, about the music industry and what it's all about, and people will say to me, "I agree with you, Mike, except this band here, who I like, I don't think that they have been tainted by this system at all. I think that they were organic and all that." I'm like, that's not, no. They're all tainted by it. They're all touched by it, all of it. So as long as we continue to make exceptions, this system will continue. So there can't be any exceptions. You have to say, okay, everything has to be open for discussion. Everything has to be open for debate. Everything has to be looked at, researched, and investigated. And if you have little pet projects or pet beliefs that you have, really, you got to say, okay, I need to take a look at that. And it could be very uncomfortable. I'm not saying it's not uncomfortable. It could be very uncomfortable because people want to believe these things, and I don't get into the religion discussion because a lot of people really get irritated, but
that's where it all began.
Even religion, we have to question.
Yeah.
We have to question religion, we have to.
Well, that was really the conception of all of this was religion. That was the first form of control, really, correct?
Yeah. Well,
we can go into that into a whole nother discussion.
Yes. And we do have to take a look at religion. It's core to what they did with religion. I'll do this real quick. They didn't want a person, a human, an individual, to have a direct connection to the divine, a connection between you and the creator, you and the source. They didn't want that, because God forbid you should be able to formulate, your connection to spirit. So they said, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have a middleman, and the middleman's going to tell you how to worship and what to believe and what not to believe and what books you've got to read and what books not to read. That's what that's what religion's all about. It's a middleman, and they inserted, that middleman in the process in order to keep you from really experiencing and
at the same
optimizing your
time
spirituality.
Created wars.
Yes.
Created their desired harvests from the warring against each other. Whose religion's right?
Right. Look at the Crusades.
Yeah.
With the Crusades, I don't know. It's we have to really take a step back, and some people are waiting and waiting and waiting because somebody's going to show up and fix everything. And my attitude is, and my approach is that God helps those who help themselves.
And they're extensions of the divine.
You have to move off the dime. And because I can't do this by myself. You can't do this by yourself. We can get the word out. We can make people aware. But like I mentioned before, if we can increase drastically the number of people who are putting information out versus watching, being spectators,
right,
then they really have a control problem. They're having a control problem now, but we can really give them a real control problem. How are they going to squash everything? They can't squash everything. They can't. So anyway, we I got a
this is
long
great,
ways
man.
from the Beatles
okay.
on that, but that's okay.
Folks, yeah. Mike, where can people find you? Sage of Quay and Rumble?
Yeah, Sage of Quay. Just go to my hub website, Sage of Quay, SAGEOFQUAY.com. And all of my platforms are there. I just released a new album, No More Gods. You can listen to it and download it on Reverb Nation and my SoundCloud. Just go there.
I'm going to put this on ninoscorner.tv right now, and then I'm going to put this on YouTube later. So I got to send it to my editing team, make sure we didn't say anything fucking crazy. But
I understand.
But this is going on ninoscorner.tv, and then it will be on YouTube. So, Mike, thanks. This is
you're welcome, David.
so eye-opening. Let's do another one, man. Let's do religion
anytime.
next.
Okay.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much, man. God bless you.
Bye-bye, folks.